To read this poetry collection, we cannot overlook the cover illustration. The cover illustration has nothing to do with the title point, where the sidewalk ends. It is very similar to the one inside the poetry collection. The title is The Age of the World. But the illustration in the poetry collection is a little different from the cover illustration. Here, the, the illustration that goes with the poem, there is no boy at the edge of the precipice looking over the edge in wide-eyed horror. Instead, a girl investigates the edge and looks beyond it, not under it as the boy does, to the perils of the open space beyond her. Silverstein also adds some flowers, an earthworm, and a hydrant, all of which protrude to the underside of the cliff and heighten the peril and fantasy. A bird squawks over his anxiety over the situation. But the cover illustration begins on the back, shows a city in the distance, with the foreground wrapping around to the front cover, to the real subject of the picture. Two children and a dog on the edge of the cliff. The sign, which the children and the dog have ignored, says, "Age, keep off." I think it suggests that this volume is about poetry on the edge or over it. The poetry inside develops themes that are sometimes common to children's poetry. The cautionary tale, the point of the advice, poetry about school and the common events and experiences in children's lives, such as holidays and conflicts with siblings and authority figures, and the common effects, such as shadows. All of these things are in keeping with traditional poetry for children in the English language, which is highly didactic or sometimes coyly sweet. As in Robert Louis Stevenson's A Child Gardens of Verses, which was published in 1885. But Silverstein pushes the edge of the propriety, sometimes deliberately violating etiquette and custom, going to the edge of what is acceptable in children's behavior and of a appropriate topic for children. The cover picture, especially because of it features the deliberate though humorous impairing of the children and the dog, signals that this is a volume that will make parents edgy and the children restless and happy. Then we come to the design of the book. The design of the book is also very interesting and very Silverstein. First of all, we find there is no table of contents, and it seems that the poems are randomly arranged. It is very inconvenient that there is no table of contents because we have to remember the page numbers or remember the illustration that goes with the poem if we want to find the poem we are interested in. But actually, it has its own style of arrangements. It has a beginning, the poem called Invitation, a cover picture that is repeated from a poem in the middle of the book, a title poem which is not the one that accompanies the picture on the cover, and the three poems at the end that constitute the book's closure. Although the book at the first glance appears random, it is not. The other organization principle is the two-page spread, which sometimes feature just one poem with a large illustration, sometimes several poems grouped thematically with interlocking complementary illustrations, and so on. I want to mention the accompanying illustration of the first poem, the open poem. It is a tall candle burning in an antique candlestick. This candlestick is used in the days before electricity for both reading and lighting the way to the bedroom. It calls forth the antiquity of the storyteller's role and signals the nighttime quality of long storytelling sessions. The candle is obviously burned down somehow, indicating the story session already in progress, but also symbolizing the light that a story gives to human existence and the light that a storyteller bodies forth. The candlestick illustration is repeated at the end of the book, after the index of the poems on an acknowledgement page. I think this is also very special because most of the books have the, the acknowledgement page before the table of contents, but in this poetry collection, the acknowledged page is at the end of the book. The two candlesticks stand like open and closed parentheses to the book's contents. In any case, the illustration is simple yet highly evocative and is used to good effect in the book's overall design. So that is about the beginning. Then we come to the ending. As mentioned previously, there are three closing poems spreading through three two pages, which show the rhythm of the book and the volume with a poem conclusion. The first poem is titled My Beard. It is about a naked man with a long beard that covers his beard as he cheerfully shanters from left to right across the straight line horizon at the bottom of the page. Nakedness is the source of the much humor of the children in grade school. Its nudity echoes two themes Silverstein carries out through the volume. First, the naturalness is virtual, and the second, that the nudity is a fit subject for children's poetry, though it is slightly scandalous and always humorous. And the second poem is titled Merry Point. Usually we would say Merry Christmas or Merry New Year, but after Christmas is over, then what should we say? Right, this is a poem about a Christmas tree after Christmas is over. The Christmas tree is beautiful in nature, but his own aspiration is to be decorated for the big event. After the holiday, the tree, in desperate, sentimental isolation, is cast aside with nothing now to decorate him and no future, abandoned as refuse in an alleyway. This is a point that might have been the ending to the book, though an untraditional one, since it begins after Christmas is over, but when there is some story yet to tell. Then the book's final poem is entitled The Search. It suggests that Silverstein's aversion to tighten up a book or a life with any kind of finality. The book Alive, which is interesting, not the product or the final attainment of some desired end. For Silverstein, pet endings are always ultimately unsatisfying and transitory, and are simply the beginning of yet another quest. The word searched is repeated 6 times. Though the speaker in the poem finds the treasure, but he has only the fleeting satisfaction when he attains his goal. The poem's final line, "What do I search for now?" It is a question left for the reader to answer, and at the same time describes the attitude of the writer toward life and childhood. Traditionally, finality and close endings are typical in children's literature, even in children's volume of poetry, many of which include the classic envoy poem to send off the book to its readers. But Silverstein is deliberately evasive here about ending the book. He deliberately violates expectations and conventionality. If there is an overarching theme to Silverstein's work for children, it is violating of expectation. That he is deliberately fronting convention seems obvious in his acknowledged page at the end of the volume and his photo on the back cover. In this photo, he looks out at the reader with his foot foremost, almost threatening a kick. But the ending question also illustrates the theme of the children's abilities to create for themselves and to shape their own lives in interesting if unusual patterns. Overall, the opening and the closing poems frame for the reader a collection that is particularly encouraging of reading and imagining. Then, let's come to the themes and the topics in this poetry collection. The first point is children's ability to create magic. There is a poem which is entitled Magic in this poetry collection. So, magic for Silverstein is a product of imagination, a gift that the children have and will use to good effect if they are adequately encouraged. Silverstein stands as one of the few authors and poems in children's literature who encourages such use of imagination, even though the final effects may be comically disastrous. In the poem Magic, the speaker met some strange creatures such as troll, witches, goblins, mermaid, and elf. All the speaker's friends seem to have put forth no efforts to make acquaintance with these characters of myth and the story. But the child at the end demands that I have had to make myself. All the magic he or she has ever come in contact with. The final line, somehow, uh, word worry is an implied complaint that all the other children have more interesting, easier lives. Yet, throughout the volume, Silverstein seems to uh, the satisfactions of inventing one's own magic. If they must lie to appear to uh, be such interesting, captivating people, perhaps this is what the speaker should do to enliven his or her life. Making magic by telling stories or using the imagination is one of the highest value this book celebrates. So, lying it seems like a kind of magic. Then the next thing is about the weird adults. In his poetry, some of Silverstein's most remarkable and memorable poems in this poetry collection, where the sidewalk ends, concerned outlandish individuals, children and adults, with names or particular habits that get them into trouble. For example, the dirtiest man in the world, or hunger, hungry Marguerite, or peanut butter sandwich. All these poems we can find very weird and very strange and interesting, or maybe creepy adults. The other thing I want to mention is about the offenses and the subversion. One of the book's most potent and continuous themes is criticism of adults and their injunctions. It is in his siding with children and their interests against adults and their definitions of poetry that Silverstein reaches his zenith of credibility. He speaks of what children think about but dare not say in adults' company. The choice of topics shows his insight into late 20th century children's lives. He articulates for them their unspoken pleasures in body functions, such as speeding, controlled belching, nose picking, thumb sucking, and so on, and about their confusion and their consternation about etiquette, their dislike of school, and their pleasure, however fleeting, in holidays. He even deals frankly, though humorously, with sibling rivalry and the fear of the dark and the grain's wishful fulfillments to those who hate dentists by having one done in by a crocodile. And it is very unusual that love for parents never appears in this collection. So, by creating the voice of a sympathetic, childlike adult and by his pervasive use of humor, Silverstein convinces children readers that he is a trustworthy, accurate spokesman for their point of view and thereby grants legitimacy to the joys and the problems of children's life and elsewhere are treated patronizingly or trivialized. Silverstein maintains a stance guaranteed to point out the weirdness of adults while distancing his own adult self from them. And then I want to come to the next thing, which is about the reality. In this poetry collection, we'll find the themes about war, race, or sibling rivalry. I think these themes are not so common in other poetry collection or in other children's literature or children's books. But just because Silverstein is so unconventional, and because he used to join the army, so I think he wants to reveal what the real world is, and he wants his children readers to know about what the real world is. Therefore, uh, he will not avoid these series or uh, these themes that most adults will not teach or will make the children avoid. Then the next one, I want to mention the theme that is about nonsensical jokes or body functions. I just mentioned the body functions such as speeding or nose picking or belching and so on. Um, these behaviors are considered vulgar, but in this poetry collection, they conveys a kind of sense of humor, and it makes the children readers or the adults reader laugh, and they don't feel shameful about these kind of behaviors. And in terms of nonsensical jokes, there are some poems in this collection seem very ridiculous. For example, there is a poem which is called Upstairs. The content is about some ravens, some birds who are living in a person's house, and the poem uh, is not very meaningful. It's just about the poem's complaints about the birds who are living in his hat. Then I will come to the reason that why Silverstein is so loved, or this poetry collection is so popular. First of all, I want to say the breadth of the subjects covered is in this poetry collection is remarkable and marks the beginning of Silverstein's poet of childhood. Uh, Elsewhere, Silverstein appeared as a persona of Uncle Shabby, and he also uh, draw cartoons for Playboy. But here, Silverstein emerges as a new voice of variety and veracity about modern childhood, unencumbered by expectations of what poetry for children should be, determined to tell what a children's life is. So that's why I would say Silverstein is so honest and is so unconventional. The first point I want to mention is about humor. From the cover illustration, you can see this sense of humor, the element humor. So, uh, undoubtedly, humor is through all of the poetry collection. In any case, the child's characters in this poetry collection, their actions are so extreme as to be humorous. It's difficult to take a lesson that seems to present a serious didactic theme because each child is simply a caricature of his or own bad habit. The situations are so out of hand and the characters are so maniatic in pursuing the bad habit that children readers are more likely to take away the situation's humor than its lesson. Silverstein followed the didactic tradition to mock it and to generate human rather than to preach directly. The second one is about Silverstein gives voice to children. He gives voice to children. He he not only speaks for them. He wants to encourage them to speak for themselves and speak what they think. Encourages their imagination, and he also reveals the hypocrisy of the adults. So let's come to the next uh, theme, which is about unconventionality. He is so conventional. We can see this from the themes he chooses, the topics in this poetry collection, and the illustrations showed on the pages, and especially his style from the uh, cover illustration, from the arrangements of the poetry, and the the design of the book, and from the the unusual way that he shows the lessons that the children have. He wants the children to learn about. So the conventionality is also one of the points that attracts readers, especially the young readers or the adults, to read his poetry or to read his picture books. Then I will come to the reason why he is so popular, which is about his self-contradictoriness. Overall, I should say Silverstein's view of human relationships is both optimistic and hopelessly depression. On the one hand, he can celebrate the human capacity uh, for oneness. On the other, he can deplore humans' abuses of. Then I will come to the next point, which is self contradictoriness. Silverstein's view of human relationships is both optimistic and hopelessly depression. On the one hand, he can celebrate the human capacity for oneness. On the other, he can deplore humans' abuses of each other while positing no counterbalancing hope. It's difficult to pin the author's philosophy on one extreme or the other. Certainly, for example, the poems Hug of War and No Difference in this poetry collection suggest that there is much capacity among human beings to accept or and enjoy each other. The array of the poems in the volume suggests that life is varied and that emotions shift. The poem represents a range of emotions but does not stand pat at any one point to avoid like a propaganda or to omit the reality of the extremes. The poems are arranged throughout the volume in such a way as to present these alternating feelings with some relief by intervening focus on other topics. Then, then I will come to the last one, which is unbelievable fantasy. Well, fantasy is the main theme for all the children's literature or all the children's books. But in this poetry collection, Silverstein's fantasy is beyond our imagination. And in his fantasy, uh, any kind of creatures or any kinds of things or anything you can not imagine or you can not think of will appear. And this point is very important. Therefore, uh, in the following discussion, I will put it at the first part uh, as the beginning of my introduction of the poetry collection, and I will elaborate this point when I come to this topic.